Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Draft Day Disaster, the series where we look back at a previous NHL entry draft, but instead of putting the most successful players at the top, we select the worst first round possible. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at one of the most requested drafts by you guys in the comments, as we turn the 2012 NHL Entry Draft into a draft day disaster. For those of you who have either never watched this series before, have forgotten the rules since the last episode, or never understood them to begin with, let me quickly take you through how this all works. So, for this draft, I have taken the 30 players selected in the first two rounds of the 2012 draft that have gone on to have the most disappointing or the most lackluster careers post-draft. These 30 players have then been ranked between 1 to 30, with 1 being the worst of the group and 30 being the best of the group based on their career statistics. Now, instead of starting with the first overall pick and counting up like the actual draft does, we shall start with the 30th overall pick, where the best player of this bunch shall be selected, and work our way down to number 1, where the worst player in this group shall be selected with the prime first overall pick, and be crowned the biggest dud of this draft day disaster. So it's a list that counts down from the best or most successful player of the group at number 30 to the worst or most disappointing player at number 1. The 4 factors that I've used to determine where each player is placed on this list are original draft position. The higher a player was actually drafted, the higher the expectation for them to be a solid NHL roster player. Number of NHL games and points. The more a player had, the better they were considered, especially if they were picked later in the actual 2012 draft. Number of AHL games and points. This is the primary tiebreaker between players that never actually played in the NHL, and number of total games and points post-draft. This was used as a final tiebreaker if necessary. So, for example, the player that played the most NHL games on this list is most likely to be nearer the 30th pick in this draft because they had the most success in the best league in the world. Whilst on the other hand, a mid-first round pick who never played an NHL game would likely be nearer the first overall pick in this draft because they completely failed to live up to the hype that comes with being one of the highest picks of their draft class. I will also point out that some of the players on this list are just now making it to the NHL as full-time roster players, so you could argue that since their stats will improve in the following seasons, that they shouldn't be on this list. However, this list is looking at their stats between the day of the draft up until the day of this recording, so what they achieve after this video doesn't really matter, as they haven't actually achieved it yet. After all, they've had 7 years to prove themselves in the league, and if they haven't yet, that's on them, you know? Now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's get into turning the 2012 NHL Entry Draft into a draft day disaster. With the 30th pick in the draft, instead of actually selecting Tanner Pearson, the Stanley Cup champion Los Angeles Kings select Mark Jankowski. Originally drafted 21st overall by the Calgary Flames, Jankowski has suited up in 146 NHL games to date, all with Calgary, and has scored 52 points. This Canadian forward is currently in his second full season with the Flames, and is scoring at a similar 25 to 30 point pace as last year, so no doubt that this 24-year-old will see his numbers continue to rise over the following years. But until then, he takes the 30th spot on this list. It's tough, but fair. With the 29th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Stefan Matteau, the New Jersey Devils select Brendan Gaunce. Gaunce was originally selected 26th overall by the Vancouver Canucks and has played in 117 NHL games, all with Vancouver, scoring 15 points during that span. Though he has played an impressive number of games in the bigs, especially compared to the other players on this list, Gaunce's pursuit of a full-time roster spot in the NHL is still a work in progress, as he has spent most of his career with the Utica Comets of the AHL. You should never say never, of course, but judging how little he has produced when given a chance to shine, it's looking less likely that Gaunce will earn a full-time spot with each passing season. With the 28th selection in the draft, instead of actually choosing Brady Shea, the New York Rangers select Slater Kokoek. Originally drafted 10th overall by the Tampa Bay Lightning, Kokoek has suited up in 103 NHL games and scored 18 points. Having spent parts of 5 seasons as part of the Lightning organisation, but having failed to crack the roster, Kokoek was traded earlier in the season to the Chicago Blackhawks, where he has found a more consistent place on the roster thanks to the team's limited salary cap space and defensive depth. After all, one team's trash is another's treasure, and we know how much Stan Bowman loves his low-risk, high-reward pickups. With the 27th pick in the draft, instead of actually drafting Henrik Samuelsson, the Phoenix Coyotes select Martin Thurk. Thurk was originally drafted 49th overall by the Detroit Red Wings, and has played in 95 NHL games, split between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Red Wings, scoring 30 points for his efforts. With Detroit going through a rebuild at the moment, Thurk has finally found a more permanent roster spot in the league, as the team gives the younger players in their organisation a chance to prove themselves. Looking at his numbers last season would suggest that Thurk has taken this chance and ran with it, but looking at his numbers this season, yikes. With the 26th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Brendan Gaunce, the Vancouver Canucks draft Boo Nieves. Originally selected 59th overall by the New York Rangers, Nieves has suited up in 66 NHL games, all with the Rangers, and scored 19 points. Similar to Thurk's situation, the Rangers are giving Nieves the chance to prove whether he is worthy of a full-time spot on an NHL roster, as the team is in the early stages of a rebuild. So time will tell whether Boo Nieves sticks on an NHL roster long term. If not, at least he will be remembered as having one of the cooler nicknames in the league. I mean, who calls themselves Boo? With the 25th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Jordan Schmaltz, the St. Louis Blues select Stefan Matteau. Originally drafted 29th overall by the New Jersey Devils, Matteau has played in 64 NHL games and has scored 7 points. However, Matteau hasn't played in the NHL since an 8-game stint last season with the league's new expansion team, the Vegas Golden Knights, and currently plays for their AHL affiliate, the Chicago Wolves. Considering his production, or lack thereof, during his last stint with Vegas, don't hold out too much hope that he'll be back in the NHL anytime soon. With the 24th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Malcolm Subban, the Boston Bruins draft Jordan Schmaltz. Schmaltz was originally picked 25th overall by the St. Louis Blues, and has suited up in 42 NHL games, all with the Blues, scoring just 5 points. Schmaltz has split his time this season between the Blues and their AHL affiliate, the San Antonio Rampage, but has put up pretty disappointing numbers this year. So unless he finds his scoring touch soon, his window in the NHL might close pretty fast. With the 23rd selection in the draft, instead of actually choosing Mike Matheson, the Florida Panthers select Malcolm Subban. Originally drafted 24th overall by the Boston Bruins, Malcolm Subban has tended an NHL crease for 41 games and posted a 20-14-3 record, a 2.87 career goals against average, and a .904 save percentage. Having been taken by Vegas in the expansion draft, Subban has finally found a home in the NHL as the Golden Knights' backup goaltender, where I expect he will continue to play for the coming seasons. As long as he doesn't take fashion advice from his brother, I'm sure he'll do fine. With the 22nd pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Oli Mata, the Pittsburgh Penguins select Anthony Stolarz. Stolarz was originally drafted 45th overall by the Philadelphia Flyers and has suited up in 23 NHL games, posting a 6-5-4 record, a 3.05 goals against average, and a .908 save percentage. Having been traded to the Edmonton Oilers earlier this season, and having continued to put up pretty mediocre numbers since the trade, it's highly unlikely that Stolarz will be playing in many more games if his production doesn't improve. And besides, he now plays in Edmonton, where goaltenders' careers go to die. So say a prayer for him, would ya? He'll need it. With the 21st selection in the draft, instead of actually choosing Mark Jankowski, the Calgary Flames select Theodore Blugers. Originally drafted 52nd overall by the Pittsburgh Penguins, Blugers has suited up in 23 games, all with the Penguins, and scored 10 points. Having finally cracked the Penguins roster this season, and having put up decent numbers in a bottom 6 role with the Penguins, it's highly likely that Blugers will see his career numbers in the best league in the world increase in the coming years. Sometimes patience really does pay off. With the 20th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Scott Lawton, the Philadelphia Flyers pick Oscar Dansk. Originally selected 31st overall by the Columbus Blue Jackets, Dansk has played in 4 NHL games with the Vegas Golden Knights and has posted an impressive 3-0-0 record, a 1.78 career goals against average, and a .946 save percentage. Considering those impressive numbers which he put up with Vegas last season, you would think that Dansk would be given a proper shot at cracking an NHL roster. But alas, that is not the case, as the Swedish goaltender has spent the entire season with the Chicago Wolves. Even if he never plays in the NHL ever again, at least he can say he was undefeated in the best league in the world, eh? With the 19th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Andrei Vasilevsky, the Tampa Bay Lightning select Patrick Seeloff. Seeloff was originally drafted 42nd overall by the Calgary Flames, and has suited up in just 2 NHL games with the Flames and the Ottawa Senators, scoring 2 points in that span. With his last appearance in the league coming last season, and having spent this year in the AHL, split between the Belleville Senators and the San Diego Gulls, there is a chance that Seeloff may suit up for the rebuilding Anaheim Ducks in the following years. However, this opportunity is albeit rather small. If he doesn't, at least he went a point per game during his time in the best league in the world. Not many people can say that they've done that. With the 18th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Teuvo Teravainen, the Chicago Blackhawks draft Nick Kerdils. Kerdils was originally selected 36th overall by the Anaheim Ducks, and has played in just 3 NHL games, all with the Ducks, going scoreless in that span. Having left the Ducks organisation before the start of this season to join the Winnipeg Jets AHL affiliate, the Manitoba Moose, Kerdils has struggled to make an impact on the roster, having played just 3 games for the team this season and scoring just a single point. Well, I guess there's always next year, right? We've pretty much gone through all of the players that made it to the NHL at some point since the draft, so I hope you're ready to hear about a bunch of players that clearly didn't live up to their potential. Begin the list of career minor leaguers! With the 17th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Thomas Hertl, the San Jose Sharks select Ville Pocka. Originally drafted 34th overall by the New York Islanders, Pocka never made it to the NHL, but has suited up in 289 AHL games and scored 138 points. After leaving North American hockey behind at the beginning of this season, Pocka currently plays for Avangard Omsk of the KHL, where he has scored 17 points in 61 games this season. With the 16th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Tom Wilson, the Washington Capitals draft Ludwig Byström. Originally chosen 43rd overall by the Dallas Stars, Byström has gone on to play 252 AHL games and scored 91 points. Byström has spent the last 4.5 seasons in the AHL, where he currently plays for the Springfield Thunderbirds and has scored 29 points in 63 games this season. With the 15th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Cody Ceci, the Ottawa Senators select Dylan Blugers. Blugers was originally drafted 40th overall by the Tampa Bay Lightning, and has suited up in 231 AHL games and scored 72 points. In fact, since turning pro, Blueges has spent his entire career in the AHL, where he currently plays for the Utisha Comets and has potted 7 points in 35 games this season. Oh, we're halfway there. Oh, draft day disaster. With the 14th selection in the draft, instead of actually choosing Zemgus Girgensons, the Buffalo Sabres select Mitchell Hurd. Originally drafted 41st overall by the Colorado Avalanche, Hurd has played in 199 AHL games and scored 39 points. After leaving North American hockey behind at the beginning of this season, Hurd played the 18-19 season with the Straubing Tigers of the DEL, where he scored 16 points in 28 games. With the 13th pick in the draft, instead of actually selecting Radek Faksa, the Dallas Stars select Mitch Moroz. Moroz was originally drafted 32nd overall by the Edmonton Oilers and has suited up in 147 AHL games, scoring 28 points. Moroz left the AHL and joined the ECHL at the beginning of the 17-18 season, where he has spent the past 2 years with the Idaho Steelheads and scored 33 points in 59 ECHL games. With the 12th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Mikhail Grigorenko, the Buffalo Sabres select Sebastian Kohlberg. Originally picked 33rd overall by the Montreal Canadiens, Kohlberg played in 87 AHL games and scored 28 points. After leaving North American hockey behind following the 15-16 season, Kohlberg has spent the last 3 years in the SHL, where he has potted 33 points in 117 Swedish League games. With the 11th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Philip Forsberg, the Washington Capitals select Matt Finn. Originally drafted 35th overall by the Toronto Maple Leafs, Finn has played in 79 AHL games and scored 19 points. Though he has played in 9 AHL games this season on loan, Finn has spent the majority of the year with the Florida Everblades of the ECHL, where he has scored 24 points in 33 games. We've reached the top 10 picks of this draft day disaster, and things really are going from disappointing to downright sad pretty quickly. Don't worry though, we've still got a long way to fall. With the 10th selection in the draft, instead of actually choosing Slater Kokoek, the Tampa Bay Lightning draft Alexander Mallett. Mallett was originally picked 57th overall by the Vancouver Canucks and has played in 77 AHL games but scored just 6 points. After a few years in the ECHL, this Canadian forward moved over to the Czech League for the 16-17 season and continues to play there to this day, as he suits up for HC Kometa Brno and has scored 12 points in 49 games this year. With the 9th choice in the draft, instead of actually picking Jacob Trouba, the Winnipeg Jets select Raphael Boussier. Originally drafted 46th overall by the Minnesota Wild, Boussier has suited up in 75 AHL games and scored 21 points. After leaving the ECHL following the 15-16 season, Boussier has suited up in the EBEL, the Slovenian League, and the Elite Ice Hockey League before returning to North America this season to suit up for Rivière de Loup 3L of the LNAH, where he has scored 22 points in 29 games. With the 8th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Derek Pouliot, the Pittsburgh Penguins choose Brian Hart. Hart was originally drafted 53rd overall by the Tampa Bay Lightning and has played in 58 AHL games but scored only 9 points. After splitting time between the AHL and the ECHL during the 16-17 season, Hart headed for Europe once the season ended and signed with the Dundee Stars of the UK's Elite Ice Hockey League, where he has spent the last 2 seasons and scored 81 points in 110 games. With the 7th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Matt Dumba, the Minnesota Wild draft, Sam Kirker. Originally selected 56th overall by the St. Louis Blues, Kirker has gone on to play 54 AHL games and score 13 points. Though he is signed with the Manchester Monarchs of the ECHL, Kirker continues to get chances to suit up in the AHL on loan, as he has played for both the Ontario Reign and the Binghamton Senators this season. With the 6th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Hampus Lindholm, the Anaheim Ducks select Dylan Fournier. Fournier was originally drafted 48th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks, and has gone on to play only 23 AHL games, where he scored a whopping 3 points. Fournier last played for Indy Fuel of the ECHL during the 16-17 season, but unfortunately, he has had to retire from playing the sport due to continued injury problems. It's a shame that things have ended this way for Fournier, but such is the risk you take when playing a high-intensity sport like hockey. We're down to the final 5 picks, and boy do I have some real stinkers for you. With the 5th selection in the draft, instead of actually choosing Morgan Riley, the Toronto Maple Leafs draft Lucas Sutter. Originally picked 39th overall by the Winnipeg Jets, Sutter has played just 17 AHL games where he scored only a single point. Sutter has spent the last 5 years bouncing around various leagues around North America, and has spent the 18-19 season with the bigger nationals of the SWHL, where he has scored 32 points in 16 games. What's that? You didn't know the SWHL even existed? Neither did I, to be honest. The more you know. With the 4th choice in the draft, instead of actually picking Griffin Reinhart, keep that name in mind, folks, the New York Islanders select Dalton Thrower. Thrower was originally drafted 51st overall by the Montreal Canadiens and suited up for a grand total of 9 AHL games, but went scoreless in that span. After his brief stint in the A, Thrower has spent the past 3.5 seasons in the ECHL, where he currently plays for the Allen Americans and has scored 10 points in 48 games. 9 games with your organisation isn't exactly what you want when you use your 2nd round pick, is it? With the 3rd overall pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Alex Galchenyuk, the Montreal Canadiens select Mike Winther. Originally drafted 54th overall by the Dallas Stars, Winther, surprisingly, hasn't played in a single AHL game since the draft. Instead, Winther has bounced around a number of North American leagues since leaving the WHL following the 14-15 season, and currently plays for the Innisfail Eagles of the ACHW. When you pick a player in the 2nd round and they never even play a single game as part of your organisation, you know you made a pretty poor draft selection. I hope the Dallas Stars considered maybe hiring a few new scouts after this draft, what with them also choosing Scott Glennie so high up 3 years earlier. Penultimately, with the 2nd overall pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Ryan Murray, the Columbus Blue Jackets select Henrik Samuelsson. Samuelsson was originally drafted 27th overall by the Phoenix Coyotes, and whilst he did make it to the NHL, unlike the last half of this list, he only suited up in 3 NHL games and didn't score a single point. A late 1st round pick isn't expected to light the world on fire, but 3 NHL games? Talk about failing to live up to your potential. Since his 3-game stint with the Coyotes in 14-15, Samuelsson has bounced between the AHL and the ECHL, where he currently plays for the Idaho Steelheads and has scored 10 points in 17 games. Looking at his stats, it was clear that Samuelsson was a stud in the juniors, but he failed to translate that success to the NHL or even the minors long term as he turned pro. With dud picks like this, it's no wonder the Coyotes have been so mediocre for so long. Before we get to number 1, I would just like to give an honourable mention to Niall Yakupov. The next in a long line of first overall draft picks by the Edmonton Oilers over the past decade, Niall Yakupov ended up scoring 136 points in 350 NHL games before leaving the league at the beginning of this season when he signed a multi-year contract with SKA St. Petersburg of the KHL. This guy was meant to be the best player in his draft class, and teams were quite literally tanking in the standings in order to try and get him, and he didn't even last 7 full years in the National Hockey League. God, no wonder Edmonton has been such a dumpster fire for so long. By the looks of it, not even Connor McJesus can save them now. And finally, last and certainly least, with the first overall pick in this draft day disaster, instead of actually picking Niall Yakupov, the Edmonton Oilers select Griffin Reinhart. A true example of how a top 5 draft pick can go horribly wrong. Reinhart was originally drafted 4th overall by the New York Islanders and has played a grand total of 37 NHL games split between the Islanders and the Edmonton Oilers, because of course he's played there, and has scored just 2 points. 2 points! A player chosen in the top 5 of his draft class has only managed 2 points in his NHL career? What makes this worse is that neither of those points are goals. Following his disappointing tenure with the Oilers, Reinhart was sent to the Vegas Golden Knights during the league's expansion draft, and has suited up for their AHL affiliate, the Chicago Wolves, for the past 2 seasons, where he has scored 25 points in 125 games. He even sucks at the AHL level! I like to think I'm a glass half full kind of guy, but even I know that Reinhart has little to no chance of becoming the player that the Islanders hoped for or expected when they drafted him 4th overall, certainly considering how poorly he has played since being picked. Considering they could have taken nearly any other player in the draft class and would have had either the exact same or slightly worse results, it's safe to say that Griffin Reinhart really does deserve this crown as the king of this draft day disaster. And that's how you turn the 2012 NHL Entry Draft into a draft day disaster. What do you think about this redraft? Is it good, bad, or would you have ranked the players differently? Also, is there another draft that you would like me to turn upside down? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Andy, Chris Gadsby, Kalesbro, Martin Tolness, Matt DeWild, Max Artis, and Nat Marlowe, as well as a huge thank you to Ryan Todd for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.